Coplen, Democrat for Congress in District 10. Why are you running for this office?
So I'm running for three fundamental reasons. Number one, of course, to defeat Scott Perry. Number two, because I want to serve all of the residents of the 10th Congressional District and help all of them to thrive. And number three, and I'm sure we'll go into the details of all this, but number three, because I am determined to ensure that we defend democracy and that we strengthen our democracy at the same time that we support fundamental core of American values. Just two that I'll mention now. That is particularly equality and government of, by, and for the people. So thank you very much for that question.
For the benefit of our statewide audience, Rick,
Right.
tell them about District 10, which part of Pennsylvania makes up the district.
Right, so we're clearly here in central Pennsylvania, and the district includes the counties of most of Cumberland County, all of Dauphin County, and a good chunk of York County to include York City and things to the west of that. So well, go ahead. I think that's adequate.
In your mind, Rick, what sets District 10 apart from other parts of Pennsylvania?
So, number one, we're here in beautiful central Pennsylvania, and it's critical to understand that we have a wide range of different people and different focus, and we have urban areas and we have suburban areas, and clearly we have very rural areas. So we contribute to the economy in all those different ways, and of course we have all those different challenges. But a wide range of people, not only people, of color, but also those that are not. And here, I'm here to serve everybody. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that. So,
Rick, do you live in District 10? And if so, which part?
Yes, absolutely. My wife and I live right outside beautiful Carlisle, PA. We've been there about 16 years. We came here in 2007 because I had retired from the Army. I was still doing some consulting work for the Department of Homeland Security. My wife came as a War College student, and our beautiful daughters graduated from Carlisle High School, and I could go on and on about my daughters, but not now. So right there, right outside the Carlisle area.
So let's explore your background, your experience, and your employment. And I understand you're on the board of the Carlisle Area School District.
Right.
So give us an idea of the issues that you have addressed there.
Right. Thank you very much. Number one, I was selected for that service in 2015, elected in 2017, re-elected in 2021. And I'll talk in a moment about all the different issues that are critically important for public schools everywhere in Pennsylvania. But I want to also highlight just one small thing. I was elected in 2021 as the top vote getter in a Republican district as a Democrat, and quite bluntly, I'm the only Democrat that's running for this seat that has actually done that. One as a Democrat in a Republican district. So the challenges that we face, of course, and I like to say, that myself and our team of 10, that includes all 9 school board members working in collaboration with the superintendent. Number one, we face the challenges of COVID. And we also, like every other school district in Pennsylvania, we face the challenges of, quite bluntly, the underfunding of public education by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So just last Thursday night, we had a board meeting where we were focusing on the budget for this year, and we immediately got, oh my goodness, there's going to be a significant gap this year. So my comment, which was quoted in the Sentinel, was essentially the same thing that I'm saying every single year, unfortunately, which is, to have high-quality public education in Pennsylvania, in the face of inadequate state funding, we have to spend money to do that. But it's an important investment in our children, not only in academics, but also athletics and extracurricular. So what I'm getting at was the budgetary challenges are clearly, I think, the first and foremost. But the challenges of COVID were also significant. If I could tell you one quick aside on that. Obviously, just like everyone else, we faced uncertainty. And we clearly said, in conjunction with the superintendent, of course we have to have our students in masks. Of course, initially, students were working remotely, and something that we're proud of in Carlisle for that was that we ensured that every single student in our school district had access to the internet. And to be blunt, again, we have over 50% of our students now are free and reduced lunch. And we all know that means that we have more poverty than you might expect in the Carlisle School District. But we were very proactive. And again, this is the administration, not me personally, but me clearly providing advocacy and support and highlighting in many instances since then that we did that for all of our children. And it kind of goes with my mindset, which you'll hear probably from me over and over again, which we have to help everyone. We have to look out for all the children. And of course, as a congressman in the future, I'm determined to help all the people thrive, as I mentioned. So
I'm interested in learning, Rick, how you dealt with the concept of learning loss. And I know you've heard about that.
Right.
And certain challenges definitely arose when kids finally came back to school.
Right, and it's ongoing. So clearly we're still dealing with some of that after effect. But here's some of the things that the school district did. Again, I'm working as part of a team of 10, so I'm not taking credit for this except for being supportive. Although I guess I will take credit for one small thing, and that is I volunteered personally. We have a summer program for youth, or at least it used to be called the Summer Program for Youth. Interestingly, it's a great model, and it's a model that I think we can use in many other governmental arenas. In other words, it's the school district working in collaboration with a nonprofit called the Summer Program for Youth. And we literally had teachers going into those programs for, to be blunt, again, primarily those students that are struggling and helping them with some reading skills. So I went there and I read. I also served lunch. I'm not going to make too much of that, but I did my bit. But I'm also always highlighting, as are my fellow school board members, that our teachers have to get adequate, number one, compensation, number two, training and professional development to ensure that we're doing the best we can to help students. So there are also, and we could go on this topic alone, after-school programs, after-school programs that have been instituted since then, and other, efforts to ensure that our students are getting back up to speed, or already back up to speed in many cases.
Now, Rick, when you were in the Army, I understand you were in the classroom as well, at West Point, no less. And tell us what brought you to West Point and about that experience.
So, thank you very much for that question. I taught for 3 years in the Department of Social Sciences, and it's a great program. But I also want to tell you something else I did at West Point as an officer, not as a cadet. I was there as a cadet and graduated in 1981. But bottom line, I was there in 92 to 95 teaching in the Social Sciences Department. And I taught economics courses, and I taught leadership courses, and I taught international relations courses and international political economy courses. Kind of like whatever they needed that day. Just kidding.
I understand. but you got to be versatile anyway, right?
Right. But I really enjoyed teaching cadets at West Point. Obviously, the men and women that are going to become senior leaders in our Army. And I've obviously then went on to teach at the Army War College for 10 years. And I'm still teaching ever since 2009. I teach at Elizabethtown College, teaching adult learners, not the 18 to 22-year-old crowd, but the 22 to 70-year-old crowd that's coming back to get a degree or a master's degree. But if I could very quickly tell you about another experience that I had at West Point that tells folks a lot about who I am. So, bottom line, I know I look like your standard white guy, but I'm not, because my mother is 100%, or was 100% Mexican American. So I'm 50% Mexican American. So she taught me and my brothers, treat everyone with respect, go out of your way to help everyone. So I got a call in 1983. I graduated in 81. I got a call saying, hey, Rick, please come back, or at least consider coming back as a project outreach officer for the Office of Admissions. And your job, and I did this for a year of my life, my job was going into middle schools, but primarily high schools, talking to students of color, some of the best and brightest in the country, because we were recruiting them and then helping
get them to consider being in the Army.
Exactly, and of course at West Point on the way there. So I'm very proud of that service. And then one other aside on that. So one day I walked into, and this made a huge impact on my life, and it's probably why I'm still serving on the school board and see education as such a huge focus. And this is what happened. I go into the middle school. I'm talking to the students for a little while. I'm thinking, these are some sharp students. They're smart. And then afterwards, the students leave. The counselor takes me back into her office and shows me their standardized test scores for Texas. And I went, oh my gosh, these students are being failed by their school and their school district. Because if there's not a significant intervention for these students, they're never going to make it to West Point. They're never going to make it to any college of any significance. So I walked out. I wept in my rental car. I really did. I was like, this is not right. So I've dedicated myself ever since to teaching and also serving on the school board and trying to help everybody, recognizing, and let's be blunt, there are schools like that in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania today not in the Carlisle School District. I'm not going to point to any in the 10th Congressional District, but there are others, and I'm just as concerned about those students as the students in Carlisle. In fact, I said that last Thursday night. I said, hey, the state representatives, I strongly encourage you to vote for Governor Shapiro's budget that he just laid out 2 days before that, and you know the rest of that story. And that's why, because I'm trying to help all of the students of Pennsylvania. Got it.
Rick, let's turn aside from all those pursuits and consider a business that you have currently. I think it's with your wife that has to do with training horses.
Right. So I'm going to say right up front, my wife is the expert on training horses. I help with, some of those fundamental tasks of shoveling, and cleaning, and necessary tasks, and maybe writing a check here and there. But my wife is the real horse expert, and I could go on and on again about my brilliant wife and how fabulous she is, in so many different respects. But yes, it's a small business. I don't want to overstate it.
Do you board the horses there too?
We do have boarded horses, and of course we do some training. My wife used to do more of that. I'm encouraging her to do more of that, but that's obviously up to my wife, not up to me.
Rick, we talked about this wide range of experiences here, so how can you apply all this experience you've been telling us about to being a good congressman?
Well, first and foremost, what I'm highlighting is to everyone is that there's a storm coming. Let's be blunt. That undoubtedly Donald John Trump, who I consider to be the worst president in the history of the United States, aided and abetted by Scott Perry, have already attempted to overthrow our government once. And I see bad things on the horizon, to include an effort to turn our democracy into a dictatorship. That's worst case. So where I'm going with that is that there's clearly got to be people in Congress that are tested by crisis. And I'm a crisis-tested leader. I mentioned, well, actually, we didn't mention yet, combat veteran with the 82nd Airborne Division, also a peacekeeping veteran with 5th Corps over in Bosnia. We helped, in fact, great story, we helped bring democracy to Bosnia, and we were there, I was there the very first year when we helped them run their first election. In fact, one of the Bosnians said to me, hey, you guys are the gold standard for elections, and thanks for being here. And we still are the gold standard for elections. So anyway, where I'm really going with all that is that I believe there's huge challenges ahead, particularly if Donald Trump is elected president. I'm going to do my best, regardless of the congressional campaign, to make sure Donald Trump is not our president. I'm also going to do my best to ensure that, of course, Scott Perry's not our representative, and that other representatives are Democrats that are going to be clearly focused on democracy. So let me just highlight the crisis-tested leadership includes the combat, the peacekeeping. It also includes the COVID, standing up for our children during COVID. So I would also highlight part of my background as well is I serve on the, I did serve for 9 years. They have term limits, believe it or not, on the Employment Skills Center Board in Carlisle. So I just finished up a 9-year term helping with that effort, which is a tremendous effort to help, just like it sounds, employment skills, to helping people that need a little bit of additional training, education, resume. We train nurse aides, clearly a need for that. So where I'm also going with all this is that I've come to understand that Congress cannot legislate the answers to all our problems. But Congress can help a lot in terms of providing resources, and I'm a facilitator. Literally a facilitator in the classroom, but also a facilitator of efforts amongst government, business, nonprofit, academia, religious organizations, the faith communities. So my point is, and I've been doing that for a number of years, not only as an Employment Skills Center board member, not only as a school board member, but also I'm the chair of something called the Rotary Veterans Initiative, where we've provided over $200,000 to help veterans. So my point is, I'm a facilitator of cross-sector collaboration to help solve public problems.
So, Rick, let's consider some other priorities that appear in your website. And democracy, we just talked about. So here's another one, and has to do with reducing gun violence.
Excellent.
So what do you suppose should be done? Try to tell me in less than 2 minutes. I want to make sure we cover as many issues as we can.
I got it. Thank you very much. So, number one, I firmly believe that one of the issues that I mentioned right up front was equality, and that we should have equality on a wide range of things and rights, but we should have equality in terms of our students, our children, and even ourselves being on safe streets. and in safe schools and in safe places. And clearly we have seen across America that there's a huge problem with gun violence and crime. And that includes areas of the 10th Congressional District. So I'm determined to be a congressman that not only advocates, but also legislates for those things. And then going back to what I was just saying.
How about some specific ideas, Rick, if you would?
I will, to facilitate those efforts. So real quick, universal background checks, gotta do it. Red flag laws, absolutely. Ensuring that domestic abusers do not have access to guns, absolutely. I've fired assault weapons. Assault weapons are good for the battlefield. They should never be anywhere in our society. Ghost guns, another example. Ghost guns clearly have become primarily the tool of the criminal. So how much?
And they're manufactured with no serial number, nobody to trace
and
them.
They can literally be manufactured in someone's home. So that's wrong. But there's also, if you don't mind, I can also add very quickly more specifics. And the NRA used to do this and ought to do more of it. And that's simply training, gun safety training, gun storage training. You know, I'm a fan of trigger locks. And I'll be honest, the recent case where a mother was found guilty of involuntary manslaughter for something her child did with a weapon when she should have stopped him or known better, I support that as well.
How about alcohol and drug treatment? That's on your website as well.
Right.
What do you want to do there?
So thank you very much. Alcohol and drug treatment, number one, key word there is treatment. We need to treat that, you know, not as a crime, and same key, well, bottom line, not as a crime, but also as something that we're doing to help people as a healthcare need and a healthcare want. And clearly there are efforts that are being made by a wide range of organizations that I fully support, to include additional funding, you know, from the national level to help with drug and alcohol treatment.
Mm-hmm. And the phrase criminal justice appears on your website, and that can bring to mind a lot of things. And for you, what kind of changes? I have a hunch you want some changes there. What would they be?
Well, first and foremost, I think I like to think in terms of helping people help themselves. Not only, you know, for those that have been guilty of a crime, because I think, number one, the people that are guilty of a crime, for the most part, in some cases, there's no chance that they're going to, you know, return to society as productive members. But for the most part, there is. In fact, I know several of those people in the Harrisburg, in the Carlisle area, and they're good people. They made mistakes. They may have fallen in with the wrong crowd. So I'm all about thinking about rehabilitative justice and rehabilitating people in prison, giving them the opportunity, you know, to get maybe the education or the training or job skills that they didn't get, you know, before, so that they can make a good, you know, not only a good, but a great living, a family-sustaining wage, family-thriving wage job somewhere nearby.
What about energy policy, Rick? And of course, here in Pennsylvania, you still hear about coal, and sometimes there's still emphasis on fossil fuels.
Right.
So how do you think we should advance there?
Well, number one, thanks for highlighting that a lot of these things on our website, you know, rickcoplandforcongress.com, because we took a lot of time, effort, and energy to flesh out a lot of those things. So I encourage people to go to the website. I also encourage people to go to the websites of the other candidates and compare and contrast who's really put some serious beef into those websites, because we have. So, you know, as I think about it, we have to think in terms of renewable energy. And clearly we know that we're a world leader, and we've got to set the pace for that. And that we're gonna go back to the times, or we're still gonna be at the point in time where we're reducing, I hope, you know, our fossil fuel consumption, and ultimately going to renewable energy sources to ensure that we're using everything we can with regard to wind and solar and geothermal, maybe nuclear fusion. I'm not sure I'm a fan of nuclear energy at this point, but all those things are potential solutions. And there you go.
Now, let's talk about the governor's recent budget proposal, and you just acknowledged that. And he happened to bring up his desire to legalize recreational marijuana.
Right.
And so if that happens on a state level, what should happen at the federal level? Is it a matter of the federal policy going through first, or how does that work? What should happen?
Well, bottom line is I do believe that we should legalize marijuana, you know, across the United States. And clearly we have a challenging situation right now where you've got some states, you know, do not have legal use of marijuana, you know, particularly for medicinal purposes, and
Right.
clearly that's first and foremost. But I'm supportive of it. I'm supportive of Governor Shapiro's assessment of it and his proposal, and think that we should do that. And of course, the bottom line is there's taxable income there for government programs, so undoubtedly we should do that.
Here's another issue on your website. You called it reproductive freedom.
Yeah, well, bottom line is that's another issue that I'll call, fits under equality. In other words, everyone, men and women, should absolutely have full control of their bodies. So I've said from the very beginning, women have to have reproductive freedoms. They have to have, and it's a health care issue. So Scott Perry has voted against everything under the sun with regard to allowing Women's Productive Act, women's reproductive, women's contraceptive, opportunities. He's against all that. Well, I'm obviously for all that, and I think that's an important difference. So I've said over and over again, not only will I advocate and vote for women's reproductive freedoms laws, but I'd like to think, and I know some would say this is impossible. Well, it is impossible given the current Congress, but that someday we can achieve a constitutional amendment to guarantee women's reproductive freedom.
Now, Rick, given your experience in the Army, what do you suppose the veterans of Pennsylvania need?
Okay, well, I'm serving as the Rotary Veterans Initiative chair, so we've been doing a lot to help, and I think, number one, the United States was brilliant post-World War II and even now with our GI Bill benefits and the health care benefits. So there are lots of benefits out there. We need to help ensure that all of our veterans have access to those benefits and are aware of them and have the infrastructure, and many of our communities do, to ensure that those veterans are able to take advantage of those benefits. And I also feel very strongly, as I've mentioned, anything and everything about education, to help ensure that veterans have access to educational opportunities. I've mentioned the college. Also, our Rotary Veterans Initiative has helped returning veterans with regard to job training skills, everything from becoming truck drivers to forklift operators to those that go on to get PhDs. So it's a wide range of things we're doing to help, and we need to make sure. I think there's a good opportunity for additional public monies, but also community efforts to help make veterans feel wanted, welcome, at home, and moving forward in their, because let's face it, they're all service-oriented people. At least most of them are service-oriented people and still are, and want to help and want to make a contribution to their community, wherever they are.
Let's talk about the war in Ukraine, Rick. So how would you rate our government's handling of funding this war?
So bottom line is, I'm of the opinion, I saw just yesterday a comment by General Wesley Clark, who I served under in Europe, essentially saying that Donald Trump's comments recently about NATO are just inexcusable. So I'm clearly a supporter of NATO.
Briefly, what did he say about NATO?
So he basically said, and I don't remember exactly what the words were. I should have refreshed my memory.
Just give us a general effect.
The gist was essentially, we are the United States of America. We're part of NATO. That's a sacred obligation. And if and Trump essentially said, you know what? If you don't pay your bill as a NATO member, we're not going to support you. And in fact, he even said, we let the Russians do what they will with you. Words to that effect. I'm sure I'm not quoting him precisely, but that's crazy. That's absolutely crazy, because it says to the world, we're not going to stand by our allies who have stood by us on many occasions and helped us. But that's the sort of thing. Bottom line is, we have to continue to support Ukraine, because if we don't, the Russians will, number one, at some point take over, or continue to hold on to the territory that they currently occupy. And it will send a message to the rest of the world, quite frankly, and it'll send a message to Putin. Go for it. Go ahead. Invade Poland. Invade any of the Eastern European countries. So it's imperative that we continue to support Ukraine.
Now, in a related matter, what about support for Israel in the war with Hamas?
Excellent question. Well, of course, number one, let me put a few fundamental principles on the table. Number one, Israel has the right to exist. Okay? Just like any other country, Israel also has the right to defend itself. But on the other side of the coin, the Palestinians absolutely have the right to exist and the right to defend themselves. I stated from the very beginning, I expressed support for President Biden and what he has done, but I highlighted right up front, and most people didn't catch this, the very first speech that Biden made from the Oval Office, like the next night, probably October 8th or somewhere in that time frame. He said that Israel, has the right to respond, and clearly to the right to get their hostages back. Not only those that are living, but unfortunately those that are also dead. But that, they must follow the rule of law, the rule of war. So that, to me, immediately says, well, if you're following the rule of war, you're not targeting civilians. You're minimizing civilian casualties just as much as you possibly can. Unfortunately, Israel has not followed that path. They need to follow that path. I think it's time for a temporary humanitarian ceasefire on the condition that I just also laid out, that the hostages and the living and dead hostages be able to come back and go back to Israel. So maybe
we only have a couple minutes left, Rick, so I want to make sure you have a chance to make a major distinction between you and the other Democrats running for this office. Try to tell me in about a minute.
Okay. Well, number one, we've got a card that we've been passing around at some of these events, and I won't hold it up, but I will say that number one, as I mentioned, I'm the only Democrat running that has actually won in a Republican district, and won overwhelmingly, or at least I was the number one vote getter in 2021. So there's also all the other experience and expertise, and I walked through all the crisis-tested leaderships that I've done with regard to combat, peacekeeping, COVID-related, all the service that I've done in my community. I've mentioned I've got an ethnic heritage, so I'm giving you just a few things that distinguish me from some of our competitors. I'm also fully funded. Well, there's a few dollars coming in from outside sources outside of PA10, but the vast, vast majority of our funding comes from right here, small dollar donors, some major donors, but not anything extravagant, to help us with that. And I'm also a lifelong Democrat. I'm not sure that's true of all of our folks. I live in the district. I've lived in the district for 16 years. I'm a teacher. I'm a school board member. I'm a collaborative person that has done that to actually make things happen, in our school board, in our community. Some of the folks, they're saying lots of good, appropriate things, but they've not actually done them in our communities in Central PA yet. So they're unproven.
Rick Coplen, Democrat for Congress in District 10, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.